in this town.
Open fire.
Hello, this is John with Theology Ed. In this video, I'm going to begin to discuss two films written and directed by Jordan Peele. The first, Get Out, which was released, I believe, February 24th, 2017. And the second is Us, which was released on March 22nd, 322, which is important, of course, to the occult, in 2019. Both of these films are loaded with predictive programming and elements that I believe probably constitute ritual magic. They're very interesting films. If you're looking at them from that perspective, they have a lot of buck and or rabbit symbolism. If you look even at the poster of Us, it has a 9/11. The way they've written the U has this large loop, which makes it look like a 9 with the 1/1. And in the films, you do have quite a bit of predictive programming, as I've mentioned. In this video, I'm going to focus on Get Out. We'll do Us in another one. There is a lot to learn from Get Out when understood properly about what they're doing. It has repeated parallels with I, Pet, Goat 2 and even allows us to understand motivations for what they're doing. Why are they doing things? And one of the things it helps us to understand is why do they do predictive programming at all? Of course, we understand that ritual magic is done theatrically in order to bring people in, to be a part of the rituals. That's part of it. But it's not the only thing they're doing. They're also doing predictive programming, not just to warn you or let you know how to get out of it and these sorts of things. The predictive programming is there, as we'll see, in order to prepare you for the inevitable. Because if you're prepared, they can have greater success. More success if more people can come along with less shock. These sorts of things. So let's go ahead and see how we can discern that from this video. I've already said that there's a lot of parallels with iPetGo 2, and there's other flags that this is predictive programming. In order to see that, it helps to make some comparisons to some other videos and films and television shows. I'm going to do that very quickly because I've done this for other videos. If you're not familiar with what I've done on my channel, please go ahead and take a look. I have a lot of videos about iPetGo 2 explained. There's a whole series on that. But I have other videos specifically designed to focus on June 21st, that's the eclipse, July 4th or July 5th, the buck moon. Those videos, all of those are going to be helpful. One that would be really good probably to watch is the knowing, explanation of knowing. So let's go ahead and get going. So iPetGo 2, this is a video about the second pet goat. The first pet goat was the book that George Bush was reading in the classroom during the initial 9/11 attack in the year 2001. iPetGo 2 has Bush in a classroom again with children, and outside another 9/11 style attack is happening. So this video is about the second 9/11 and events related to it, around it, surrounding it, and coming from it. In that classroom, we're given a calendar. The calendar is the 2020 calendar. It begins with January with the barbed wire around the Chinese indicated yin-yang month. So the month that has the yin-yang saying Chinese New Year's happens in January, and it's in barbed wire indicating that China was already in lockdown due to the pandemic in January. But it wasn't until March 11th, 2020, when the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic, and that the whole world became sort of locked down, and the barbed wire sort of spread and went around everyone. April, we were all locked down very tightly, and it's sort of loosening up as the map indicates, and will return to being pretty intense, it looks like, in December, but it'll continue. So we have March marking the beginning of lockdown, which happened. On June 21st, between the June and July months, we have the annular eclipse. That is the June 21st annular eclipse associated with the solstice, and for various reasons is important to the occult. And following it is the buck moon. That is the full moon in July, called the buck moon or the stag moon, and it will happen on July 5th, the night of July 4th into July 5th. The buck is indicated on the wall here as a buck, but we also have a male rabbit here representing a buck in perfect position for the buck moon. Notice that before the buck moon, grass is clean and orderly and nice. Afterwards, it's wild vines and a mess. Also, we have an indication and several indications throughout IPECO 2 of a Middle East conflict in the fall of this year, and perhaps some larger events in December, but certainly here we see the lockdown tightens up. Now, in other predictive programming, we see some of the same things. In The Simpsons, 10 years ago or so, we had the episode that pointed out the 2017 Great American Eclipse, shows the Simpson family watching it. Then afterwards, they represent a lot of time with the sun and the moon and the earth spinning around. A lot of time passes before Lisa has to start looking for a ring, which would indicate the ring eclipse or the annular eclipse. That's the June 21st, 2020 eclipse. When she's looking around, she meets these people from an ancient order, and they said the Freemasons searched for the gem, and they said the gem will be revealed during the first full moon after a solar eclipse. And so, just like we have our solar eclipse and the first full moon and things changing, in The Simpsons, we have the solar eclipse, the first full moon after, and what happens? All hell breaks loose and an Antichrist figure takes over. Then we had Drive Angry. In Drive Angry, there was a satanic ritual scheduled to take place involving the sacrifice of a child on the first full moon after, and they don't tell us, but it's going to be the first full moon after the eclipse, given what we know from other films and things. Okay, the first full moon after something, the satanic ritual will happen, in which ritual the leader will invoke or seek to gain power over the hounds of perdition, the demons, and bring about a new world order. Then we have Knowing, a film that shows a vision to this child of a solar eclipse, an annular eclipse. The child goes to look out the annular eclipse and finds a burning stag. This is a male moose, usually called a bull, sometimes referred to as a stag. It's perfectly legitimate to do that. And the stag is burning while the whole world burns with it. Later in that same film, when that date actually happens and the prophecy or vision is being fulfilled, at midnight, we see that the date is 10/19, which is 9/11 in reverse, pointing to the rectangle 7 and 5. That's the July 5th buck moon date. Also, we have the Cage character running out and being startled by a buck, and then encountering a son with a male bunny, and then right before he burns to death in a solar flare that's going to destroy the world and everyone on it, he is standing in front of a picture of a buck. Okay, this is the buck moon, represented as associated with the end of the world and a great fire that consumes everything in the second 9/11. So again, we're getting the same repeated themes. Then we had the Be Ready advertisement, which shows our sequence again. He's looking for a false flag attack and trying to find what's going to come next. And before he does that, he looks at these numbers. You can see he's looking this way. There's the 311, that's the pandemic declaration. There's 621, that's the June 21st annular eclipse, and there's 7/4, the night of the buck moon. Okay, so he looks over there and he says, that's the one I want, and he clicks Runaway Sector New York Water. Then we have the 4th of July satanic ritual in We Summon the Darkness, which was released this year. In this film, a group of cult members go out and pretend to be Satanists, kill people as a part of a satanic ritual summoning the darkness, and then blame the Satanists so that they can get converts and members. So it's a type of false flag attack on the 4th of July, 5th morning, 4th of July through the morning of the 5th, in order to accomplish some other end. So now, with that in mind, we can look at Get Out, which has a lot of Buck symbolism that's very important. And they also, a lot of things in this video correspond to very specific details in iPetGoat 2 that we've been discussing in the iPetGoat 2 Explained series. And I'm going to show that. And when it's necessary, for people who aren't familiar with that series yet, I will be putting some pieces together for you with a little bit of review. So it will make sense even if you're not familiar with that series yet. So the story is about this young black man who is dating a white girl, and she invites him to go meet her family for the first time after about 5 months, 4 or 5 months of dating. And on the way to meet her parents, they're driving along the road and they have an accident. They hit an animal. An animal jumps in front of them, hits them in the windshield. Very strange place to hit them. Notice that the animal is about the size of a windshield wiper here. That's, I think, just an interesting observation, because the animal flies away much larger and lands in apparently as a buck, or not a buck, a deer. We don't know if it's a buck or a doe, because if it's a young buck, we don't have any antlers yet, but so we don't know if it's a male or female. It doesn't really matter at this point. The point is they had this accident, hit a deer. Just an interesting observation, because deers, and especially a buck, are going to become very important later in this film. Then they go and he meets the dad and the mom, but the dad's going to show him around the house and everything sounds great and friendly and all that. And they pass this buck, and then things become a little weird. He starts talking about Aryans and Nazis and bizarre stuff like that. And later on, this scene will sort of come back to us. We'll see this buck, and actually a second buck statue had been added later, and it's in front of an important place in the house for the film. But what they do plan, what the parents plan, is to have all these white people come over for a big party. They don't tell him why, of course, but the people are coming in order to look at this guy, meet him, and decide whether they want to buy him and then control him, occupy his body. That sounds weird, because it is weird, but it's what the film is about. When they do place their bids, they say, oh, let's go play bingo. When they really mean is, let's go have an auction and bid on this young man. The young man went off somewhere else and wasn't around, and while he was off doing something else, they bid on him. This is the winning bingo card that they used for the bid. I don't know exactly what it means. I haven't found the patterns yet. I'm sure there's some sort of meaningful information in here. Of course, I see important numbers, and you may see them as well. We see the date 6/21/20. That's the eclipse. We see 7/5/20. There's the buck moon. So we do see numbers here that seem important. But until we have some sort of principled way to say these numbers are important in this order or something like that, it's nothing more than a coincidence to my mind. But if we can find the pattern or a pattern that would help us to understand what's going on here, we may find that not only is 6/21/20 or 7/5/20 important, maybe some other numbers are important, we can also find new ones that may fit into this pattern as important or valuable for us to understand things. So for those of you who are really into digging into numbers and very good at it, I've seen you in the comments before, so I know you're out there. Have at it. Take a look, see if you can come up with something. I may dig in later as well. But for now, I just wanted to make sure you have it. There's that card. But once they bid on him and one person won the auction, they seize him basically. And they lock him up in this room in isolation, total isolation, locked up. And what's he in front of course? A gigantic buck. So he's looking at this buck, and his first response is, oh, crap. And below the buck is a television. And he moves his eyes down to watch the television, which is being used while he's under this lockdown in this locked up state to propagandize him, basically, to change his mind, to persuade him to become comfortable with this new life he's about to undergo under the control of and being possessed by some other man. So the first thing he watches is this, I'll call it sort of like an advertisement for the procedure that's going to happen to him. This guy's going to tell him, oh, you're going to become a part of the family and things are going to change or whatever. And he says, don't waste your strength. Don't try to fight it. You can't stop the inevitable. And this is really interesting because what's happening is he's getting predictive programming. They're telling him what's going to happen on the television while he's he's locked up, basically, and tied down. And when they're showing him all that's coming, they're not doing this so that he can fight it or change it or go and get away or anything like that. They're like, no, you can't do anything about this. And we're going to find out why they did that, because they actually explain why later. It's pretty interesting. But the video is about behold the coagula. So it's we can look into what that means perhaps at another time. But that's what the program is. It's the coagula program or that procedure that will be happening to him. And they're going to remove his brain and put it in they remove his brain and take the brain of the person who purchased him and put it into him. So it's like a brain transplant so that that man can then occupy this guy's body. But this guy isn't going to be totally gone. They're going to have to keep his brain stem and some very minimal parts of him there. So there will be minimal consciousness forever with this guy while this other person controls his body. That's the idea. Now he sits there and look, while he's watching this television, he's locked up, locked down, watching the television, basically being psychologically beaten while they propagandize him and try to change him. This other person comes on the television. This is the person who purchased him, and he's going to tell him all about what's happening. He says, and the reason he does that is because he said, if you know what's coming, you cooperate better, you participate better with a greater success rate for the procedure. And this, I think, also tells us why predictive programming is happening. Predictive programming is happening because they don't expect everybody to die. They don't want everybody gone. They want some people to be familiar with what's going on and better prepared psychologically for the transformation of society so that when they come out on the other side, they have complete control of them. Now, phase one was the hypnotism. Now, before this happened, the mother of his girlfriend hypnotized him. She hypnotized him. He wasn't voluntarily participating in this, but she hypnotized him. And this was an important step. She was a psychiatrist. The father is a neurosurgeon, so they work together here. Now, they hypnotize him. He says, phase one was the hypnotism. That's how they sedate you. And I think we can consider this stage, this initial stage, this phase of hypnotism where they sedate us, as being something they've been doing for a long time. Things like fluoride in the water, the effects of vaccines, the television that people have been spending all their time watching for the sake of entertainment, children just sitting there vegging on video games and television rather than doing things valuable with their time, all sorts of things that sedate us. And we may even be seeing sort of an acceleration of that with the lockdown, if that's part of the sedation step. That may also be part of phase two. And so that's where we'll talk about phase two now. Phase two is this, mental preparation. It's basically psychological pre-op. And when he says phase two is this, he's saying the state you're in right now, locked down totally, tied down in this room, being psychologically abused, having the TV tell you that all these changes are going to happen to you, whether you want it or not. And look, he's sweating, he's terrified, he's suffering. That's phase two. It's mental preparation, has a correlation or a corresponding scene or scenes in IPEC Go 2 that are pretty explicit. We'll look at those in just a second. But it's a psychological pre-op. That's what they're going through in phase two. And it's this. Where are we at? We're in the buck scene. He's in the room staring at the buck. He is in the mental preparation phase, this break him phase. That's associated with the buck. That will continue to a third phase after that. That's the transplantation. In the sequence, he goes into the buck room for phase two. Phase three is in the surgical room. That's going to be down the hall, outside the buck room. So it seems like whatever goes through this buck phase is preparatory for the final transplantation phase when you become totally under their control and the world, everything is different. And we see the exact same thing in IPEC Go 2. So let's take a look. Oh, and I should mention, I've already mentioned it. It says a sliver of you will still be in there somewhere. You'll live in the sunken place. And the sunken place in the video is this state that he was in when he was under hypnosis earlier, where you can see from up here, he's looking at the woman, but it's like she's very far away. He's like way back there. And his own sensation of the situation was that he is falling endlessly without any control over anything. He had lost total control. He was in the sunken place. That's the state he'll be in when the other man occupies him. He won't be totally unconscious. He'll have limited consciousness in this state that's like hell, but totally under the control of somebody else. Now, and when we go and look, what's going on here? Remember, in iPetGo 2, Harpocrates, the babe in the egg of blue, and the babe in the lotus flower, is born in July with the buck moon. And then afterwards, we see immediately afterwards in the video, the egg hatches, Harpocrates is gone, and there's no inner strength in the boy, the egghead. And what's happening? When he has no inner strength, he's being drugged, he's being abused by the television, screaming at him what's coming, screaming at him, and he sees markets plunge, war coverage next, these sorts of things. And he's being abused with the bad news after one thing after another. Change coming. Terrible news on the left, terrible news on the right hand, right? He's going to be experiencing all of this. And this comes with what? The buck moon. When Harpocrates was born, then the egg hatches, Harpocrates disappears, and humanity is without inner strength and is suffering. This is a parallel. You see the parallel. We have the buck moon room, the birth, the egg, and then we see the television talking to the locked down man, abusing him to where he looks beaten and he looks beaten. That's phase 2. It's a mental preparation. What they're going to put people through, starting here around the buck moon, is going to be a phase very, very, very difficult psychologically for people. Lots of bad news should be coming after this. Not all in one day. This isn't going to be a one-day event. This is going to be abuse for a while. That's the idea. And when we look at the calendar in iPetGo 2, as we've seen in the iPetGo 2 Explained series, it's not all right here. May not even be a big event on that date. But what we do have is a continuation of big events, or a lot of events and conflicts and high stress situations that will begin and continue through the end of 2020, and we even go on into 2021, as I've shown in that video. Because 2020 looks like your buck moon misery and abuse, which will ultimately lead in 2021 to 2022 to the transplantation. That's when things finally completely change, and they think they've got you mentally ready for it. So this is mental preparation, psychological pre-op. Before that was sedation. If they didn't have you sedated, what's going to come probably wouldn't be as effective, they think. And they also, like I said, they do the programming, predictive programming, and so on, in order to prepare you for the inevitable, in order to help ensure that some people get through this and come out on the other side ready as successful conversion experiences. Now, we continue and we see with the transplantation part, at the end of the video, what happens to Egghead? He stands up and he's like a new man. But notice, he still isn't who he was. He still has an empty head. And he does look sort of possessed as he walks away as this new person for the new age, for the new world, under their control. Now, this egg comparison is also almost explicitly made in Get Out. When they're about to do the surgery, they go to you have the old man who bought the boyfriend laying here in the bed, ready to be opened up. When he's opened up, they're going to bring the young man into the room to take his brain out and then put his brain in it. So they're going to do the transplant in his head. Now, before we see that, take a look at the scene that they show of this man's head. There it is. They make the egghead comparison pretty explicit, I think. Here's your egghead, here's your egghead, Here they're going to open up the egg, and they're going to take the brain out, put it in the other one. So we have, again, another parallel between I, Pet, Goat 2 and Get Out in this scene, in the sequence related to the egghead character in relation to the Buck Moon and the events that happen afterwards. Now, he gets up, he beats the guy who's going to bring him over there, and he escapes. And when he escapes, he gets the buck off the wall, and he kills the doctor with the antlers. And then there's a bloody buck with a dead body, and it starts a fire in the room. Okay? So the fire, again, is associated with the buck. In this case, it's a bloodied buck. And that fire is going to spread. And I'm not going to get into all the details of how he gets out, because that's that's the movie stuff to make it exciting, how it ends, and everybody walks away feeling good. But he runs up the stairs, and as he leaves, we see as he comes out of the stairs, where was he at? He was at the door, basically guarded by, in this case, you see 2 bucks. They brought another one in. In the first scene, they only had 1. It's like it wasn't enough. They wanted a second one in this exit scene. They're like, get another buck, put it on there. And so you've got the buck a second time. So now when we look at the whole thing in comparison to the calendar, it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? What we have is predictive programming before all of this happens in order to get us mentally ready for the inevitable so that there's success to their program. They think if we're going to have success, we need to make sure that the people come along with it, and we're not going to get many if we just throw it on them. We have to have some people, or the people, mentally prepared so that it's not such a shock. And so they did predictive programming for that reason, to increase success rate. They also sedated us with fluoride, vaccines, television, professional sports, movies, entertaining us to death, video games, and so on, so that we were distracted while they made plans, while they prepared things, while they were getting ready to sell us in the movie and Get Out. They hypnotized him and sort of got him distracted with all of that, off in the woods, taking pictures or something. They were selling him and having a bingo auction. And so they were preparing, and this is what's happening here. They prepared for a long time while we were too distracted to even know what was going on or to do anything and organize any resistance, to the point that it was too late to do anything about it. That was the sedation phase. And that got us up to around March, and maybe even is still ongoing to some extent, up until the Buck Moon, at which point things really change. And we enter phase 2, which is the pre-op psychological preparation, right? The op is the operation, the actual transition, the total transition from one way of doing things to another, one way of thinking to another, one world order to another.
Transferring power from one administration to another, or from one party to another. But we are transferring power from Washington, D.C., and giving it back to you, the people.
And we give it back to you, the people.
For too long, a small group in our nation's capital
Are corrupt.
has reaped the rewards of government,
The rich.
while the people have borne the cost.
The oppressors of generations who have kept you down with myths of opportunity.
The establishment protected itself, but not the citizens of our country.
And do you accept the resignation of all of these liars, of all the corrupt?
That all changes, starting right here and right now, because this moment is your moment. It belongs to you.
None shall interfere. Do as you please.
January 20th, 2017 will be remembered as the day the people became the rulers of this nation again. The United States of America.
It will endure.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome to the Donald Trump Museum, dedicated to America's #1 citizen and America's greatest living folk hero, the one and only Donald Trump. Learn the amazing history of the Trump family.
Somebody criticized me the other day because they asked me what I'd do, and I said, I'm going to bomb the shit out of them. It's true. I don't care.
And I guess I have some very good enemies, and I like it that way somehow. And I really believe in trashing your enemies.
Inside, you will learn how Donald Trump's father left him a large inheritance.
Nobody's going to do more women than Donald Trump. That I can tell you. That I can tell you. And I think they know it.
Discover how in 2016 Donald Trump successfully lobbied to legalize gambling.
Part of the beauty of me is that I'm very rich.
He wants to run for president and move on into the White House. Why not?
Share in the stupidity of the average American as they made him the 45th president of the United States.
That will easily go down as the greatest president in the history of the United States. Me, Donald John Trump.
No! Hey, no! Hey, wait, you come with us upstairs.
There you go, Sonny. We can do this the easy way or the hard way.
There will be non-stop or almost non-stop bad news. We're going to be abused in front of our televisions, if you want to think of it that way. And, of course, some people will actually experience things firsthand. But it'll be a very hard time. And we'll be going through this abuse that is depicted in various films as, a fire on earth, in a bloody stag, some bloody events, water events probably, as we've seen in other places. We're going to see one thing after another, apparently, that's just going to pile up, and people are going to be broken by it. And then it's only after that that the new world order, if you want to call it that Ian of Horus, is totally ushered in with the transplant. And the people that are still around are going to rise up barely like they were before, not even the same person, under the complete control of someone else. That's the idea. That is what Get Out is saying. That's the message behind Get Out when we look for what's hidden in there as the programming element. Like, subscribe, let me know what you think in comments, share the video, all of that. Take care.